Happy New Year, everyone. I trust you had a great Christmas break with your families. I'm John Waters, Managing Director at Abercorn International Search. Welcome to episode 3 of our new monthly podcast, where we get the chance to talk to some of the great people we've been lucky enough to help with their career journey. Our guest today is a gentleman who I believe to be one of the most innovative and entrepreneurial CIOs in Australia. He has worked for some very high-profile brands like McKinsey and BNP, as well as Talent International, and he is currently the CIO of the largest privately held container logistics company in Australia, ACFS. Jason Spiteri, welcome to Inspiring Careers.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
So
along.
you got here okay this morning then, despite the traffic and the train strikes and the weather, yeah?
Yeah, a few mishaps on the way through, but the weather's horrible at the moment. So.
Yeah, and enjoy your Christmas?
Yeah, I had a good Christmas. Usually Christmas for me is just winding down with the family. I've got 4 kids, and they're all quite young, 7 to 14.
And all well behaved?
All very well behaved, yeah. I'm a very lucky man. My wife's really good with the family, setup and the kids and sort of looking after everything from sports to schoolwork to tutoring.
Yes.
I got out with the family, took them out to Northern Beaches,
yes.
Palm Beach, around Avalon.
Yes.
Avalon, yeah. It's really nice in Avalon, actually. It's really not backward. It's like being in another city. It's so calming. It was very quiet that time of year. I think everyone was away overseas and on holidays.
Yes,
so.
Well, one of the reasons why I live on the south coast is because I can go for a walk on Giroa Beach and there's nobody else there, no matter what time of the year. So we've known each other for 5-10 years. I've always enjoyed talking to you. I always learn when I talk to you. Today we're going to discuss your career journey. Give us an overview on how you get started in the IT industry.
Yeah, so look, that's going back quite a few years now, so many moons ago. I think I started my career about 33 years ago. You've got to remember this is at a time, we didn't have the internet or anything like that. And so, I recall sort of sitting in my lounge room, or my parents' lounge room, and, back then you had the book, the white pages and the yellow pages.
Yes.
And I'm sort of preparing to do my 3-unit geography exam, which was my final exam for my HSC. They used to call it HSC back then. I think it's TER or TAR or something these days. I should know because I've got 4 kids. And I found myself sort of, looking at what I wanted to do, and kind of law was one of those things that I might have been interested in. And I sort of opened up the yellow pages, and I found the biggest ad for a law firm. The name of the company was Abbott Tout Russell Kennedy. They're Square in Martin Place, 47th floor. So very prestigious.
They would have been a high-profile law firm.
Very
at that stage.
high-profile.
They probably have merged with somebody else now.
So they were a very prestige law firm, and I dialed the number, and I don't know. It's kind of a blur where I ended up speaking to somebody. And I had a script, like I knew I was expecting to do 50, 100 calls.
Yes.
I've always been that, that way minded. I'll write a script, I'll get it right. And I got it kind of halfway through my script and they were like, yeah, why don't you just come in? And I've gone, wow, literally the first call. So then I think I remember doing my exam, and then the following day, and I sort of, went to the city. And look, I grew up in a sort of, predominantly a single parent home. And
yes. Where are your people from originally, by the way?
Yeah, so my parents are Maltese.
Yes.
So originated from Malta, fresh off the boat, as they call it.
Yeah.
So they've been here, 50, 60 years now.
Yes.
Australianised. So headed to the city, and I must have been one of the partners, and we're having a chat, and the chat was like 2 hours. And at the end of it, I was totally blindsided because he's like, so what do you think? And I'm like, what does he mean? What do I think? And he said, job's yours if you want it. And I'm like, okay. And I was like super excited. So I've walked out, and my dad came out to the city with me. I wasn't familiar with traveling. I was 17, but being at home. So my dad came out there, and he's probably out in Martin Place smoking like a chimney as he did, right? So he's sitting there waiting, and he's a patient man. So I got down, and he's like, in Maltese, he's like, how did you go? And I was like, I got the job, Dad. So we're sort of off home. And so I did sort of 3 months, while I was sort of waiting for results and stuff, working at the law firm. I'd applied for law. I'd applied for sort of.
Now, without being sycophantic, have you applied for law when you were doing your HSC? You must have been pretty academic because you don't get into law unless you get a decent score, right?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't say I was top of class. I wasn't bottom of class. I was probably somewhere in the middle. So my grades were okay, but they actually weren't, that great. But it was enough to sort of get me through.
Yes.
And the degree I'd applied for, you needed to work full time. It was a part. So I was looking to do a part time. I think it was called an SAB course at Sydney Uni. To do the law degree, but you had to be working at a law firm and kind of sponsored by, a lawyer or a barrister or something like that. So after spending 3 months there, and, I was just a basic entry level working in the mail room, I got exposure to serving subpoenas and you go to the law courts.
Did you serve subpoenas on anybody that you know?
No. And I don't know if it's still there, but, I can't remember what street. Just off Hyde Park, the police used to be out there,
Yes.
so you'd always be going there, or running out to NRMA to do their. I should have sort of, if I knew what I knew today, like I'm doing their registration. I was the gopher, so I was doing registration for Ferraris and Porsches and whatever. Thinking these guys got really nice cars, and but it was kind of boring. Like maybe it was the job I was doing, but I felt like, is this right for me? Am I going to be bored? It wasn't just about career and money and whatever. So,
So how did you address that? Did you sit down with the gentleman and have a chat with him about after 3 months?
I actually didn't. Like I guess in hindsight, I should have. Like knowing what I know today and giving advice to young people, I would definitely encourage that conversation, because you can't really know what a job is until you've actually been doing it for quite some time, I believe. So, and then circling back, at around that time, I also sort of applied for, I always wanted to be a pilot. That was my dream as a kid, wanted to be a pilot. So I applied for Air Force recruitment. Like I said, my grades were okay, but they weren't great. I sort of got through, the physicals and, the eye tests and all of that sort of stuff, and most of the aptitude testing and stuff. But then I looked at my grades, and at that time, the stats was something like 40,000 applicants, and out of 40,000 applicants, 10 make 10. 10 make the cut.
Excuse my ignorance. Are you talking about becoming a fighter pilot or
Yeah,
something?
becoming a fighter pilot, in the Air Force, yeah. So 10 make the cut, and out of 10, 4 are pilots and 6 are navigators. And so I looked at those numbers, and being, I guess, somewhat intelligent, and I looked at my grade and I was like, look, it's just not going to happen, right? Not now anyway. So then I sort of got exposure to the law thing, and my second choice was computing, so computer science. And I had a mentor at the time who, he's like, computers are going to be the world of the future, right? Everything's going to be about the digital age. So then I took my second choice and I started doing a 3-year computer science degree. And like I said, I was a good student, but not a great student. I think sometimes it's the things that interest you more.
Yes.
The things you're more passionate about. So I kind of failed chemistry while I was at uni 3 times. So I'm a good repeater. But I seem to excel.
So you're persistent.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. It's like anyone. You do something and you really don't like it. You don't focus on it. You don't study it. You just try to stay away from it. I was kind of lucky because in that second year, going into my third year, they kind of changed the rules with the syllabus. And whilst I was really bad at chemistry, I was very good at physics.
Okay.
And so, I was talking to some of the advisors, and I got, kind of into the university life. I was part of the sporting arena. I used to play a lot of football, so I was on the touch football team.
Excellent.
I was looking to get on the Australian teaser side to represent, Australia on the tertiary games. We went down to Canberra, we played there. And then I sort of made track and field, so I was running track and field. And then, with a change of syllabus, I was able to sort of skip past the chemistry, and I sort of picked up extra physics subjects. That meant I had to do a 4th year. And speaking to one of the advisors, I think at the time I thought he was crazy, because he's like, look, if you pick up some extra subjects, you could double major, so you can get a computer science and a physics degree. And I'm like, I was thinking, I'll just coast the last year. But it was literally one subject for an extra year. So I took his advice, and it was a pretty heavy year because it was 7 subjects per semester. So I did 14 that last year. Looking back at it now, I'm really glad I sort of stuck to my guns and dig my heels in. because it was quite funny having my family, when you get your degree. And
So are you the first person in the family
I
to
am
get
the
a
first
degree?
person, yeah. So first person to get a degree, and my family sees me going up on stage to collect the degree and then sit back down again and then go back up again to get the second one. Or whatever.
Excellent.
So,
Yeah.
I think,
so that you graduated with a double degree computer science and what, physics or
yeah.
What was your first job then in IT? Was there a graduate recruitment scheme or anything then, or how did you get your first gig?
So while I was doing that final degree of weird physics, like astrophysics, often in universities, well, this is what it was like back then. You get like the armed forces would come in and they do the promos and talk to you about joining the armed forces as well. And the army was there talking about the highlights was this is what I took away: special service entry, training as a combat pilot, and it was a 14-month regiment. And I'm like, okay, well that's not really long. I could do 14 months, like jam packed, and it was flying the Black Hawk. You'd be a Black Hawk pilot. So I was like super interested. So I started looking into it, did the testing, sort of went up to Fighter Town, on the way up the coast near Nelson Bay. And I remember standing in a line, there was one girl and the rest of it, were guys. And it was just sitting there and there's this like drill sergeant and he's sort of explaining, the way they are, they're tough, and explaining, the helicopters, etc. And kind of we're sitting atop a hill and there's a whole bunch of trees on the right-hand side, and then kind of out of nowhere, this Black Hawk helicopter, like a few feet off the ground, super soft, like you just came out of nowhere. We're like it's just that wow factor.
Yes.
And I was like, this is it, this is for me. And then, fast forwarding a few weeks later, my mum was really concerned with me, becoming a combat pilot. There was some unrest in the world, and a mentor of mine also sort of, so they kind of got me to rethink going into that line of work. And I sat with my mentor, can't remember where we were, but we were in a pool, just relaxed and having a chat. And again, he was pitching the whole, the digital age. It's all going to be about the digital age. If you want to be a pilot, you can do that part-time. You've got a really long career and a really long life. If that's your passion, maybe you just think about whether that's your hobby or your passion. You want to do that for a career, and kind of I thought about it, and then I decided, look, I'll give the computing thing a go. I can always change tracks because I'm still young. And he was working at a company called Quest, which was at the time of the largest company under the Unilever umbrella, and Unilever is one of the largest, I guess, businesses in the world, and it has a very large network. It's a big operation.
Yes, in a former life, I did work for Procter & Gamble.
Yeah. So, ERP and Risk 6000 systems, and, before we had all the technology that we have today, back to Windows 3.1 and NT and all of those things. So he got me an interview with a commercial manager who ran the business out west in Sydney. Again, sort of an hour interview. And we just had a chat, and he looked at me and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Look, I'll be honest, I don't really know. Like, I don't know what I want to do. I know I like computers." He goes, "What are you looking for?" I said, "I'm looking for a break. I'm willing to work for free. I just need some, on the job training, right? So I'm looking for an opportunity that sort of just gets me a foot in the door, and I'm not expecting anything back for it, but I'll give you every effort." And then he gave me an opportunity. So I started working the following week for free. They did the right thing. So I think after 4 weeks, they paid me the whole time I was there. I ended up being their longest casual employee in history. I think 4 years I was still a casual.
Well, you were there for 4 years, okay.
I was there longer than 4 years. So I went from, I had a really good start because the help desk manager there was very tech, right? Hardware, software, and he was a good coach. So he taught me the foundation. Like, I learned the foundation. His name is Luke. Don't know what he thinks of me, but I've always thought highly of him for giving me that start. So having a good coach and a good mentor is, I think, fundamental. So, we spent, the first year learning, and then I sort of started dabbling with Lotus Notes development, a few little projects. Lotus Notes was quite big back then, mail systems, etc. And I moved from sort of help desk to administration to regional administration. At that time, I started traveling with the company just on engagements, and talk about sort of learning at the speed of light. I was engaged to go to Indonesia, so I was going to Jakarta to deploy some. I was there to do an audit and a Novell audit, Novell Windows sort of audit, and deploy these RISC 6000 systems for the ERP, so the manufacturing side of it. And I didn't know anything about like AIX, right? So with the operating system. So they've sent me on a course for a week. I started the course on the Monday. I finished the course on the Friday, and on Friday afternoon I was on a plane to Indonesia.
As an expert.
As the expert, right? And, they'd always send an IBM engineer who knows the tech, right? So, I took a lot of notes, I asked a lot of questions, and I learnt a lot. I think I read the manuals on AIX back to back on the flight there. So I kind of knew what I was doing by the time I landed, because I didn't want to be uncomfortable. And I'm kind of one of those people, unless I know everything or enough, I'm very uncomfortable. And I don't like to be uncomfortable, especially with the tech. So I spent some time, on and off in Jakarta on and off for about a year, spent some time in Japan, went to Europe, to Holland, for a global kickoff project. I think that was when Windows NT was coming in. Yes. So there was sort of a global project. And it's interesting, I remember a couple of things when I went to Holland. I got out of the airport. It didn't even feel like I sort of went through customs or anything like that. And then I sort of come out the airport, and there's this it looked like a Mercedes-Benz on the wrong side of the, the driver's thing. And I'm thinking, geez, that's a fancy car. And then they've taken me straight to the office. And then I had an escort, and they're showing me around. And I thought they were showing me that this is how big Quest and Unilever, like the operation is. They're showing me around, and I thought it was the town. And we're working past this a firehouse with 2 fire engines, and I'm like, oh, this is like a really cute town, right? And he's like, no, this is the site. And I'm like, what? I couldn't believe it. And I was like, how many people are here? And just that one site, there was probably about 2,500 people.
Excellent.
And you see lunchtime, there's a big horn that blows out, and thousands of people are jetting on a lunch area. So it was quite an interesting time. And then I remember the global head of IT, we went out for drinks and dinner, just to get so that was an experience where the key people in IT from South America, North America, Asia and Europe all joined in the Netherlands to kick off this global project, because he wanted to get everyone together, smart guy. And he was an interesting character. And I remember I was sitting right next to him at dinner, and he was a big drinker. So he's for every, he's ordering me these, pint beers, and he's drinking 2 for every one, one of mine, and I'm falling behind. Suffice to say, we're all pretty liquored up by the end of the night. And I remember I'd been working with a guy from the UK for 4 years, and back then you didn't have there wasn't cameras, and it was all on the phone or email.
Yes,
and you used to be able to build relationships like that. And I remember his name, Jez, and we'd met for the first time face to face, and we were sort of leaving, and he was going, I said, look, I've just got to duck into the bathroom, make sure the minibus waits for me. And so I've come out of the restaurant, and the minibus is driving away, and I didn't know where I was or where I was going, and it's sub-zero temperature. And I'm I'm doing the dash after this bus. It's turned the corner. I didn't catch it. And then I found myself just walking. At some point, it started snowing. So I'm sitting in this foreign country. I didn't know where my hotel was. And and it was dead silence in the middle of the night. And I hit this point where I hit a crossroads. And I remember there was a train track and a canal. And I looked to the left, and it was it was endless. And I could go straight. And then out of nowhere, this Dutch bicycle rider it was empty. In the middle of the night, he's just whistling, and he was just bicycling by. And I sort of stopped him and I said, do you have any idea where I could go? And he's like, no, but if I was you, I'd go straight, because that way is nothing. So I was like, okay. And then I found myself walking for about 20 minutes. And I remember, because they dropped my bags off, so they stopped in at the hotel. And when you get that sigh of relief, I saw all the lights, and I saw this hotel in the distance over a freeway, and I started like then running like through a paddock over the freeway, and I sort of walk in, and you know when you're like sub-zero freezing and you walk into a warm room, the steam's coming off you.
Yes.
And mentally I'm steaming, right? Because I'm like, how could you guys leave me behind? And I walk in there and they're all around like the bar, and there's a beautiful fire going, like a natural fireplace. And I walk in and I'm like screaming, like, how the hell did you guys leave me behind? Like, and the head of IT's coming, he's put his arm around me and he's like, now this is the attitude we need. See? Adaptable. You know, he's been able to take a bad situation and he's found his way home. And I was like, I'm going to kill you.
Yes,
like, you know,
yeah.
so that was kind of my start. That was my first job. Quite an experience. I think it's probably my steepest learning curve.
Well, I was going to ask you, how long were you there for?
Now you're testing my memory. Probably about 6 years.
And the other thing I'm interested in, particularly for a young audience, you must have had to do a lot of private study because of all the big projects that they were dropping on you.
Yeah. Everything was reading every manual, working with engineers that are better than me, getting tips and pointers, asking a lot of questions. I'm very curious, so I ask a lot of questions. Yes. I did, back then you didn't have the internet, so you're reading books basically. I wasn't that great a reader, but I think at that point I became an avid reader of technical information anyway. And I started to hone my skill. I think that's kind of where I started honing so I had a good start, good foundation, good coach, then started, honing my skill on my own. The help desk manager left, so I sort of took over the help desk management at that point. And then I was the regional admin as well. And then my boss was the head of Asia Pac, which was a very high role. And he quit. And then I'm like, and so they didn't replace him. So I ended up substituting for him for the last 6 months I was there. So I was kind of doing all those roles. So look, I was young, I was fit, I lived around the corner from the place. And so suffice to say, I'm pretty sure I was packing in 16 or more hours a day easily, right? But I managed to fit in, staying healthy and, I'd go to the gym and then run and, sort of kept fit and boxed back then.
So did you then, were you headhunted after that to McKinsey's or?
No. So the workload was insane and they weren't looking to get anyone, and I was kind of complaining.
And I presume they didn't give you a salary review either?
No. So I was doing quite a bit. So I wouldn't recommend this, but I guess through frustration, that same commercial manager who gave me my first break, and in hindsight, I should have it ended with me thanking him, let's put it that way. But in the heat of the moment, after, feeling like I wasn't being heard, I sort of tear in my eye typing my resignation, and I printed it, and I sort of burst into his office and I sort of threw it on the desk and I was like, I quit, because I was kind of on my own. And then look, I did so I quit. That night, 2 guys from Holland were on a plane to fly to Australia to convince me not to leave, and they offered me a pretty hefty pricing, like a salary increase.
Yes.
And look, I'd already decided to leave, and it wasn't really just about the money, although the money was very attractive. So I decided to leave, but I did the right thing. I stayed. I didn't have anything to go to. I just quit because I was just done with it, and I didn't have any risks. I didn't have a family. I lived at home. I didn't have anything, any dependents or anything like that. So I quit, and I replaced myself with 7 people. To give you an idea of how much work I sort of was able to sort of triage through. And it's not sort of to boast about it. It's just, I wouldn't recommend that. It's not normal. You just don't do that, right? And sometimes you've got to think about before it's too late, before you get to that point. So
yes, yeah.
So I'd sort of left nothing to go through, and I had vendors at that stage. I was managing vendors, and one of the owners, I think it was the company was called Computerland Integration Center. Really nice guy. I thought he actually got into running some vineyards, which he probably owns at the moment. I think he owns probably a very well-known computer company. I just can't remember it off the top of my head right now. And years later, funny enough, I was getting pitched on some tech, and the guy gave me his card, and I could see the surname, and I was like, "You don't know this chap?" And he's like, "Oh, that's my dad." Small world. So
shows we're getting old.
Yeah. So I left there, and I thought I would just take a break. I was just tired. And it was a couple of days later, I got a call, and he's like, "What are you doing next?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he's like, what do you know about Lotus Notes? And I said, well, you know what I know about Lotus Notes because you guys were working for me doing, projects and stuff. And he's, look, have you thought about contracting? Would you contract for us? And I was like, I kind of didn't want to. I just wanted to take a break. So I thought I'd throw, he goes like, what would you charge? And so I thought I would throw a figure that he would say no to. And to my surprise, he said yes.
Yes.
So I think it was something like, and this is 33 years ago, I think it was like $220 an hour or something like that, right? And he's gone, yes. And I've gone, holy crap, like, that's okay. And then my second thought was, if you're going to pay me that, what are you charging the client? And I remember the conversation because he's like, I've got this gig at one of our, it's a really important client. They're in the seeds business and they're called Yates. And this is back when Yates wasn't a well-known brand, right? So off I go, kind of winging some things because I was good, but I wasn't that good. Reading manuals again. And I believe I probably implemented their first mail system at Yates. So,
excellent.
Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. So I was sitting there. I was at Milpera out west, and I remember that was my first contracting.
Yes.
And then it sort of bounced around for about a year or so, and I kind of wasn't into the short-term contracts. So I was looking for something a little bit more permanent. I found a role with a more long-term contract. So it was still a contracting role for a company called the Royal Blind Society in the West. A very humbling role, awesome group of IT guys. Two of the guys in the team were vision impaired, super funny guys, had a lot of funny experiences. And I really loved the place, right? The IT, like my manager was probably one of the friendliest, nicest managers I've ever worked for. Super intelligent guy as well. And I learned a lot of new skills, right? They had recording studios and, they're all suspended, a lot of money. And it's a non-for-profit, so obviously a lot of charitable donations helps run that business. And look, they extended my contract. I guess I was doing something right, quite a few. So I ended up being there about 2.5 years. And then, I could tell that he wasn't comfortable having the conversation, but there wasn't budget. So, I was fine with that. So they let me go. They didn't extend the contract. And sort of entered back into the market. I noticed an opportunity with McKinsey, so that's where I sort of entered into the McKinsey world.
And did you know that they were a very high-profile consultancy at that stage?
I actually didn't. I didn't really know much. It was just, it looked like a really interesting role. And then I did my research, obviously, to prepare for the role. And I was like, oh, well, these guys look really prestige. And they weren't in the, the buildings have all got, A, B, and C class grade buildings in the cities. And I think they were in a B grade building. When part of while I was there, we moved to the ABN AMRO building in the city, which is very nice and quite noisy when it moves, like quite squeaky when we were up there on the floors. You don't want to do a fire drill because you end up walking down 50 floors of stairs. And just from the get-go, you could tell the difference in the culture. So, I was working with a chap. He had 13 interviews to get his role. I had about 10 interviews. And it's just the structure that they put in place. I interviewed with someone in the States, someone in Japan, mix of business and IT people. I met my, soon-to-become manager. And she was from German background, very lovely lady, very switched on, really good manager, really good at running ops. So I learned a lot from her. And there was a lot of respect in our team. So the team I was in, they were all like high skilled. So we were all like senior. There wasn't a junior. We were responsible for, specialized projects, global projects, and running the daily operations for McKinsey globally.
Yes.
So it was a follow the sun thing. And then
Yeah.
So, and then, somewhere across that role, at some point, some of us would get called in, to like a think tank where they want our expertise.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Do you think that they, as a very high-profile brand, did they take their IT organization very seriously in terms of the fact that they understood the value of IT and the impact that it made on their business?
Definitely. Their job is to consult the largest companies in the world, right? So, I can't give you the number, but let's just say it was north of 700-800 million, like budgeting. So it's a big operation. And they've got their prestige, and look, people have got two sentiments when it comes to McKinsey. You've got the naysayers with anything, and then you got those people that are like, they're top end of town. They really know their stuff. That's all I can say. Internally, whether it's the business consultancy, they hire the top 5. Like, to work at McKinsey, you've got to be in the top 5%. You got Harvard, Stanford graduate.
Yes.
IT's even higher. They only hire sort of top 2%, right? So they're really choosy. They've got a really rigorous structure when it comes to acquiring talent.
Now, I'm interested in that. Did they put a big effort, therefore, into helping you guys to develop professionally and personally?
Yeah.
With a lot of courses, etc. And I don't know the answer to that. I'm just curious. More than anything.
The succession planning, appraisal process, there's so much structure there, and it's all fine tuned to the nth degree.
Yes.
I've never worked in an organization since McKinsey that was that well run. Even global ops, and it's because they hire we've got good talent and we're quite educated to fine tune everything. You had budget for training, you got adequate training. There was a buddy system. There was good mentorship from not only a direct manager but global managers.
Yes.
So I had a dotted line to a senior manager in New York, and I took that job, and within 2 weeks, here's your Amex card and you're off to the States. Do you know what I mean? To get that induction. I was like, okay, which hotel do you want to stay in? Blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Go talk to them.
Yes.
So it's all I can say is it's a big operation. Global ops, we're managing something like 12,000 laptops globally, moving everywhere with consultants, right? And this is going back some years. I remember a case in the Middle East where we had a consultant, laptop died. I think we were with HP at the time, and he's about to go into a client engagement the very next, I think the day or that afternoon. And our operation, I made one phone call, and that triggered the data, the backup, so a key that would go out. So within 24 hours, he received a box with a brand new laptop. He put the the USB key in, pressed the button, and he was like the day he lost the thing. Do you know what I mean? Within 24 hours, that's pretty clean ops, right? And that we could do that anywhere in the world. So and he's not sitting in exactly back then the easiest place to get equipment to. We're going back into the Middle East. So that I sort of remember that experience. I guess the other thing that I experienced, I was kind of on daily ops when Welchia, that common virus, which now has many variants. And I just remember we had HP OpenView screens, which is, monitoring and stuff like that on networks. And I've got, the network team, I've got all the teams there, and I'm running the global ops. And I just see the network, I just see every site, Japan goes down, everything's going red. And I'm like, what's going on? So, and the size of the operation, we were very closely intertwined, with Microsoft. Back then it was Symantec, so they were quite big. And, within maybe 2 hours, we're in calls with, senior people at Microsoft and Symantec and trying to figure out what's going on in the world, because that didn't do McKinsey, that did everybody, to try to figure out how do we solve this problem and get ahead of it. So that, that was kind of my day. I made quite a lot of friends at McKinsey who, I've kept in touch with some of those.
Well, I was going to ask you that because you guys obviously had a great bunch of lads and ladies that you work with. Do you still, in your job now, do you have a network of guys and ladies that you've worked with that you can refer to regularly so you can bounce ideas around, etc.?
I do. Look, over the years, the team from McKinsey, I think some of them have kept in touch. Admittedly, I wish I'd kept in touch with more of those guys. I think when I moved on from there, the 2 roles after that, I've definitely kept in touch with all of those guys.
Yes.
So, and look, if I was to bump into, I think one of the closest guys I work with, Aaron, if I was to bump him into him in the street or whatever, it was like it was yesterday, hey, how you going? Yeah. So there's that, there's that camaraderie.
And how long were you there? Because the one thing about yourself, to give you credit, you've got a wonderfully stable work history. How long were you at McKinsey's for?
I think it was about 8.5 years.
Yeah.
Always shy of long service leave.
But what prompted then? Was it BNP after that? Excuse my
No,
ignorance.
look, I think it was one of those. I think it was one of those tales where you got this big consulting firm, and it was a time where outsourcing and offshoring was getting it was the popular thing, and you can't consult the biggest companies in the world on business strategy and say you're going to reduce costs. It's better to outsource and not do it yourself.
Yes.
So I think, whether they admit it or not, I think that was kind of the catalyst that we need to look within. And I was actually on the project team to look at, coaching. We were looking to introduce sort of an India operation, and then in Europe. So we went into Prague at the time, and it was actually one of my mates in the team who actually went and spent about a year like setting up the operation in Prague. Really good operator as well. And yeah, so it looked to give you an idea of the size of the operation. I mean, we had to go to adjoining countries, and I don't think there was an IT person on the market in Prague or an adjoining country after we set up that operation. That's how big, the scale of that operation is. So I spent they were offering sort of redundancies at that time.
Okay.
I got offered another role to specialize in a particular niche area, but it wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. So it's not like they asked me to leave or I quit. It was, I took a redundancy, but I took a redundancy and I stayed on for another year and a bit, I think. And there was a really big global monitoring project I'd started, and I became a kind of a specialist in that area as well.
Yes.
So I wanted to finish what I started. So I stayed the next year, finished that, helped train a lot of people in India, and helped sort of set up, parts of that, not the actual operation. My mate was doing most of that in Prague, but sort of helping part of the team to like just help mobilize the Follow the Sun, through India and Prague, and then back through, the States and Australia. So it was kind of four quadrants. So, and then I sort of found myself unemployed again. And it was at a time, I just recently got married. A mate of mine was getting married. I was in the bridal party, and he was in Holland. So I told my wife, look, why don't we go? I'll take a break. It was only a modest redundancy. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to sort of take a trip and sort of take a bit of a break. So we decided we were going to go to Holland. And because my parents are from Malta, I was going to go to Malta. And my wife's Colombian. So I said, I've never been to Colombia. Let's go to Colombia. And for what started as a 3-location trip, I don't know how we got to the point where I was living in Woolloomooloo, not far from here, at the Domain Apartments. And I would just sort of walk to McKinsey. And I planned that trip for, I think, 3 months. And I remember it was at Flight Centre just across the road from the ABN AMRO building. And I remember the lady saying, wow, I'm excited. This is the largest sector booking I've ever done. I think it was something like 22. So I got round the world tickets.
Yes.
And we were on the road over a year, and sort of did the wedding thing. And then we traveled through Europe and then North America, South America. I had this passion to see some of the 7 wonders of the world. So,
Yes.
I ended up going to the Grand Canyon, and we went to Patagonia and Peru, and and I look back at it now, and the only thing you can't replace in life is time. Do you know what I mean? You can't get time back. So, before kids, being newly married, having that experience with my wife, it's something.
That's almost like an unexpected sabbatical, for want of a better word.
It was, yeah. I was so relaxed when I got back. It was my wife that was sort of kicking me in the heels, saying, "I think you've got to go and get a job." Because I got back and I was like super relaxed. I was sort of house sitting for a friend. I had my own house, and I made a commitment to house sit for him. So I house sat for him for a little while. And his brother lived nearby, and we got on really well. So, and she's sort of kicking me, going, "You got to get a job." So I started like slowly looking, and it happened faster than I thought. So I think in 4 weeks, I was offered. It was actually the same day. I was offered 2 roles on the same day. It's good to have choice, but sometimes it's not so great, because I'm like, it was a bit of I had to think about which role I would take. It took me a little while, and then I end up ringing the CIO at BNP at the bank. And I was kind of honest with him. I said, look, I've been offered another role. It's a more senior role. The pay's significantly better. But, I like the promise of working for BNP more. I think it's more stable. I think it's a large company, and there's other opportunities there. So, that conversation, he said, look, I can't promise you anything. All I can say is things are changing, and there may be some restructuring going on. It may happen within 6 months. And I said, look, the salaries aside, I'll give you 2 good years in that role, and gentleman's agreement, and I took the role, and he kept his promise, because then 6 months later there was a restructure, and I sort of my title changed, and then it changed again, etc. And I had a direct manager. He was a French Canadian guy, super funny guy. Probably one of the funniest guys I've ever met.
Yes.
He's in Singapore now, living the high life as semi-expat.
Yes.
Probably riding a bike around. He's got his kids in international school. I kind of lost touch with him. Matthew was his name. He's very, very fun. Good. Like he was just a character. Let's put it that way. So
Well, but you see, that's interesting because if you work in a fun environment with good leaders who create a good culture, that means that you want to hang around as opposed to leaving.
yeah, look, that Frank, the COO, I think he's moved into the non-for-profit space now. Highly intelligent guy. I have a lot of respect for him. So he gave me the opportunity. Didn't fail me when things happened. Matt always had my back, so that was good. And I always had his back as well.
And any major highlights that you
yeah, look,
remember
I
from
mean,
that one?
it was highly technical, sort of managed, teams there, acted sort of as a liaison. We managed the trade floor there. There was an arm of it was called Cogent, but it was acquired by BNP. It used to be part of AMP. And so, on the fifth floor, there was like a whole nother IT department of like 80 plus people. And then we were down on level 2, more sort of the infrastructure, managing the large data center. I guess one of the biggest projects I worked on was like virtualization was coming in.
Yes.
So our consolidation ratios were insane. It was like 90%. So, you'd have this huge data center with, cabinets and like rows of cabinets. And I remember like it was 3 or 4 or 5 rows consolidated like to half a rack, and it was more powerful than like all that physical kit. So, and I remember like, a bunch of like jokes and a lot of late nights and, things like cabling. I've got a really good mate that still works. He's been there for well over 20 years, Terry. And he's part of the furniture at BNP, right? So, he's still managing the data center out there and he's a good lad. So
Excellent. Yeah. Talent International after that?
yeah, so same sort of thing. They were looking at outsourcing and offshoring with BNP. Again, I was part of that process, just to hand things over. Well, because I always like to leave places in good shape.
Yes.
And do the right thing before I, if I decide to move on. Again, they offered me a role there. There was some discussion about a role in Hong Kong, and I didn't feel like I wanted to move my young family to Hong Kong, etc. So I took a redundancy, and for me, most of the teams, either I was managing or working with, were being sort of displaced to Singapore, like the hubs in Singapore. So for me, that's like family. So they go, I go. So I decided to also go. So I decided to take a redundancy there. Got back on the market. Well, actually, I didn't get back on the market. So I got a call. I used to hire some contractors. Recruitment. They've got those panels, and I used to hire from like through Accenture, and he knew of me and my reputation. From as being a client. It was Sean. He was the GM at Talent at the time in Sydney office. So I got a call from one of his recruiters, and I thought they were asking me to come in to interview,
talk about another job or something.
to talk about another role in the finance area, because obviously now I've got this 8.5 years finance background in core banking, and so again that was like I had an interview with her and she's asking me a whole bunch of questions. And that whole affair was about, and you got to remember, this is the last day. And my team knew everybody at the bank. And it's 9 floors. We got the building rights. Everyone from the CEO to the guy that's sweeping the floors, everybody knew us. We knew them, super friendly. So we had probably the largest contingent of mix of people going to Martin Place Bar to have drinks that night. So I'm in like, blue leather jeans and a leather jacket. I think it was July, so it was June, it was winter. And their offices were down at the end of Martin Place. So I was sort of rocked up, on a Friday before I went out for drinks. And then Sean walks in, sits down, introduces himself as the GM. And he looks at me and he says, have you ever thought of something out of left field? And I was like what? And he said, why don't you come work for us? And I thought he was joking, right? I honestly thought he was joking. And we've joked about it over the years. I thought he was joking at the time. And I kind of pointed and laughed, like I gave him a bit of a chuckle. And I said, you're kidding, right? And obviously I didn't know anything about recruitment at that point in time. He said, no, I'm dead serious.
There are those who would argue that I still don't.
Yeah. No, you know your stuff. So, and look, he's a good operator because he said, look, go have your drinks, take the weekend, mull it over. we'll give you more details about the role, but you need to meet Mark. I think Mark he's now the CEO, global CEO. So he was the CFO at that time, and a really good operator. So he said, look, I think you need to meet Mark. Why don't you come back on Monday or Tuesday and have a coffee with Mark? And it was really after meeting Mark, he sold me on the vision, right? So he was really good at selling the vision, right? So, and we had really good rapport, which I liked. So, and I'd be reporting to him. So that was good, yeah. So, again, back then, it depends on the person, I think, and the expectations, right? Because like now as a CIO, I don't think I would, like personally, I wouldn't report to a CFO. Right? I think there's a misalignment between the purse strings and the direction that you need to go in for business strategy.
Yeah.
Not that it's a bad thing. So for those who do, but those who do that have some challenges, like as a CIO, they would know what I'm talking about. And I sit on a panel of CIOs.
Well, that leads us nicely into the current role then. Do you report to the executive director and the board?
So I report to the CEO.
So can you give us a brief overview in the current role and even your day-to-day activities? Because you did tell me earlier that you had something that you had to sort out this morning, yeah?
Yeah, things don't change in IT. So IT people will understand that, you have the major incidents. So yeah, we've got one today. Got a call. I think I went to bed at 2:30. I got a call at 5:30 from the CIO who's at the moment in New Zealand to give me the heads up. I was like, thanks for that. Half an eye open, and so sort of then trying to figure out what's going on. So initially thought it was like a Citrix issue, but it's not. Doesn't look like it's a Citrix issue. It looks like it's an issue with Microsoft Explorer, which has been decommissioned.
Now that's interesting because you're with ACFS. You're in the container logistics space. What I'm curious about, and perhaps some of our audience might be, are there different issues across these different industries from an IT perspective, or do you tend to find that your experience over the years is allowing you to solve, for want of a word, similar problems?
I think it's a mix of both.
Okay.
Running an IT operation has a lot of similarities, no matter what the organisation is. There's a given you need certain processes and good structure. Without good structure, it just never works. So these days, I've learnt as I've sort of elevated my role to look at structure as one of the most important things. And, that's the definition of a CEO. We're all about people, process and technology.
Yes.
That process piece is quite important. So the flip side, the differences are it's what the organisation gets into. So like for us, we've got bonded sites, so we've got high surveillance requirements and CCTV footage, and there's compliance with Homeland Affairs, which is Border Force. So we need to comply with those types of things, and then there's stringent compliance.
Yes.
So I wouldn't have that requirement, say at Talent as a recruiting firm, right? So at Talent, because it's recruitment, you're looking more at maybe you look at that at every organisation because there is some element, including where I work now, as far as like privacy and confidential information and rating those things. But I think in recruitment, you're dealing with people's private information, so there's probably a heightened awareness and risk profile around what you manage there. And again, one of the companies I manage is a recruitment company, Labour Power. So it's I'm looking at that, but the profile, the profiles, because I'm the CEO across 5 organisations at the moment. You're 3 quite large, 2 smaller, and it's trick of spending time with each one. But the profiles of the businesses and the needs vary, but there's some similarities, like things that like we're trying to conform across like standards across organisations, and things like the cyber footprint, like security awareness frameworks, stuff like that, and just general things like maybe telephony. With more companies, you get a better deal because there's more volume. So print, basic things like print, and seeing if we can converge like networks while keeping things segregated for security reasons, because they are operated and managed as separate entities, like separate companies. Yeah.
Now, you're in a leadership role. You always come across as a very smart and also very genial man. What sort of leader do you want to be for your team?
Hopefully one I am already. Look, I think one of the things I've learned is you've got to be firm but fair, and you have to lead by example. I kind of feel that there's a necessity to some degree to get your hands dirty and roll up your sleeves, right?
Is that from a credibility perspective? I'm curious.
I think it's a credibility. Look, I think it's part personality, part background. I come from an engineering background, and I'm one of those leaders that the success is, my job is not to direct everybody. My job is to help everybody. And then if they all succeed, we succeed. Right?
Yes.
So I still keep my eye on the prize and make sure that we're lining up to the vision, to the direction we're going in, and give that guidance, give that coaching. But, like today, for example, right, I could delegate comms out, but there was kind of no one that was across it early enough. So I'm sending comms out to the business, mainly to the executive management, to say, like, this is where we're at, this is what's going on. These are the things
is that
are
almost
great.
like, if I look at the AICD course that we did, et cetera, is that almost like, crisis management in terms
It
of
is.
keeping everybody updated?
Yeah. I call it incident management. So
Okay.
major incident management. I think crisis is another level altogether.
Okay. And how many people have you got in your team at the minute?
It's not a very big team. So, it is if I'm including like the vendors who are like part of our team.
Yes.
So at the moment, there's myself, Anthony, who's part of the family, so director of IT. I've got a head of digital innovation, head of digital transformation. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
So this is interesting because you have
Probably
worked
about 7, 8.
You've worked for a headhunting company previously, and you've run some very large teams, I know, from your previous job. So what do you look for in a potential employee?
Okay, yeah. So I've always run tactical teams, by the way. So the bank's a big operation at McKinsey, so those teams were quite large.
Yes.
So I think talent, and here it's a mix of building skill with small tactical to control, and to drive and to build like that IP within the organization, and leveraging vendors and offshoring and stuff like that, but treating them like they're part of the team and making sure that the structure and the sentiment is like they operate like one of your team. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I find that IT managers make, in that they treat the vendor like a foreign entity. And that relationship is key. It doesn't work when you treat them like a foreign entity. If you create the structure so that they operate like they are
part of your
literally
team.
part of your team,
Yeah.
you're more likely to succeed, right? And they're more likely to be there when the proverbial,
Yes.
hits the fan. So yeah. But to go back to your question,
What do you look for in an employee?
what do I look for in an employee? I definitely look for attitude over aptitude.
Okay.
I always use this example of like attitude versus, say, skill set, right? So skill level. If I had 2 candidates and I had someone that was like a 9.5 out of 10 skill level, and a not so great attitude, or someone I couldn't sort of feel like I could work with, or if I'm hiring or interviewing for someone who's a direct report, like they wouldn't be managed by me, they'd be managed by another manager could, so I look for team fit, I look for culture fit, it's kind of, obviously you look for the skill set, they've got to have the right skills and qualifications, but I think the attitude, because you can take a 7 out of 10 and everyone can learn and they can get coached, but it's very hard to change someone's attitude, especially that they walk in with a bad attitude. That's not ideal. So, and nobody wants to work. You want someone who can work autonomously, who can be a team player, who's got a bubbly personality, who's happy. You get somebody who's sort of grumpy at the first day of their study week. It's not great, right? So
Yes.
So you want the team to gel. You want them to back each other up. They're not going to be. They don't have to be best friends, but they have to have a good work. I look for a good work ethic.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? I look for a history of a good work ethic. Obviously, when I'm looking at a CV, I'm conscious of seeing whether they had contracting background or perm. I think one of the strongest things with my CV is, I've shown
dexterity, for want of a better word.
and stability.
Yeah.
I haven't sort of jumped in and out of roles. That I think that's a bad sign when it's perm and they're jumping in and out of roles.
Yes. Yes.
quite often that shows a pattern. And normally I wouldn't discard it. I would just talk through it. Do you know what I mean? I had a chap and another manager that I was interviewing at Talent, and she didn't like his CV. She didn't want to look at it, but she made a mistake because he was a contractor, so he was changing roles, and he was perfect to a T. Good attitude, really highly skilled. I did the whole tech testing thing. The manager he was going to report to did the same thing, and we loved him. And she was like, "No, I don't think he's right for us." And I was like, "But what is it?" She's like, "He doesn't have stability in the roles." And I was like, "No, but he's contracting." I said, "And we're a recruitment firm, so that's the first thing we should look for."
And in that instance, it depends where a gentleman or lady is in their life and their career. If they've got married, need a mortgage, they may need that stable, permanent work history for bank purposes, etc. So I can certainly see where you're coming from. You're obviously a leader that leads from the front, but what do you do for you? What do you do for your own personal development and growth?
Probably not enough. I think these days I'm starting to do more. I've got to get back into, I think, reading more. Podcasts are good, and sort of, learning videos while you're in the car driving to the office.
Yes.
Industry events. I've got an inept way of sort of getting intel from people because I love talking to people. So I kind of get a lot of, I think I spent 2 years, part of my life, I can't remember what part of my life, and I lived, you live modest. I didn't have a TV. I didn't read the newspaper. I didn't listen to the radio. And someone thought that I was talking to a friend over a beer, and he's like, "You're odd. Like, how do you go 2 years and not do that? How do you know about all the stuff that's happening in the world?" And I turned around and I said, "Well, if it's that important, someone will tell me." And usually that's the case. So I think that's probably one of the main things I get. Like, because I talk to so many people and I deal with so many people, I hear about everything anyway.
Yeah. And have you any particular personal targets? Any courses you want to do down the track or anything like that? Hey?
The OECD is probably
So, what are you most proud of in your career up to this point? I know you've had a lot of outstanding achievements. Any one or two particular, and it might even be a family thing, but what do you feel particularly good about professionally, first of all?
I think seeing some of my direct reports move on to bigger and better things. I think that's I'm happy about that. So hopefully I've played a part in that success story for someone else.
Yes.
So, and I keep in touch with quite a few people that I've worked, they haven't worked for me, or, they haven't been, I've just worked with people, peers or whatever. And, I had a humbling experience, sort of my last role. I had a chap come up to me and he's like, "You're not like anyone else." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he's like, "You have no agenda. There's a lot of politics in organizations. You just help and you don't expect anything in return." And I was like, "But isn't that the way the world should be?" So we got on really well, and and the thing is, he said that, but I got that tenfold from him as well. So it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So if you've got the right attitude and you've got the right relationship, it kind of does work.
And that means that people will want to come and work for you again in the future because they've worked for you in the past. Everybody's looking for a great work-life balance. What's your favorite hobby away from work?
I'm a fisher, so since I was very young, so I think getting out and wetting a line is my thing. So
yes, boats or beach or everything.
I do both. Yeah, I do both. So I've got I've got a WhatsApp group. It's called IT by day, fisherman by night.
Okay.
So I've got a mate of mine who's sort of partner in a cyber firm, and my old 2IC, and one of my current 2ICs, and so I've got him into sort of fishing. He's super into it now. So we sort of get together every now and then, and we get a boat. I've got a boat license, so we sort of head out to Hawkesbury, or
No, do you wear a life jacket?
No,
You should do.
We've got them on board.
Okay,
Yeah,
just for show. Yeah.
Oh well, they're there if we're going to sink. But if you're rock fishing, you definitely have to wear them these days.
Yeah.
So it's a compliance piece. I've got one of those, thin, with the canister type things. So I don't generally rock. I'm getting old, so I get too sore rock fishing these days. So.
All good. Now listen, the last question, and I always think it's our most important question. What advice do you have for any young people starting off in our wonderful IT industry?
During my last role, actually, that exposed me to a bit of coaching with young people. So, and then I've kind of volunteered with a couple of organisations to speak to young people, in organizations who are sort of like going through like certs and learning and stuff like that. I think, for young people, set yourself the right expectation. I think know your limits and where you are in your career, because you're just starting out in life.
Yes.
You've got a long road ahead of you, and you may change career paths. So, don't try to decide where you're going to be when you're 35 or 40, because you may not know, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't. Most people that are in their current occupation, if you ask them, 9 out of 10 probably didn't decide that's what I wanted to do. They just, one way or another, they kind of ended up there, right?
Yes.
And part of those expectations is, in coaching, young people, I've often asked kids, would you work for free? And I get this sort of, especially ones that have got a university, they're in university, about to leave, and I can see that glazed look over their face, like I've offended them,
Yeah.
right? And I think there needs to be, I think with generational change, there's this overarching expectation. COVID happened. No one wants to work. Do you know what I mean? I think employers feel like, I've got to pay these huge salaries and get them a cup of coffee by the time they rock up to the office.
Yeah.
Let them work for anywhere, and it doesn't really work that way in reality, right? I believe in moderation. I'm pro work-life balance. I'm pro hybrid working. I don't think one or the other works. I think 100% in the office. I think the days of that have gone. I think 100% at home doesn't work either, because you're disconnected. There's no social aspect. It's not effective in anyone's role, especially sales type roles. So everything sort of, there needs to be a moderate approach to all of those things.
Yeah.
But, I think people need to consider if you're struggling, especially if it's your first job, if you're struggling to get that opportunity, you've got a network that you just don't know it. Your parents know people and professional people. Get them to ask. I've got a young chap who's just finished a degree in Queensland, and his dad's working for me, and I'm trying to figure out, what in my network might be an opportunity, because I'll be helping somebody I know.
Yes.
Get a young lad who's super smart, get a leg up in the cyber business, right? In the cyber. So, he's a super smart guy, and he's just looking for a break. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's willing to work for nothing
just
to get a start. And look, if you look at my experience, I had that attitude, but I never worked for nothing because I got paid anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And most organizations, if you do a good job and you just get stuck into it, the good will come. You just have to have faith, and if it doesn't happen, you can always move on. There's nothing to lose, right?
Yeah.
If it's not the right employer, or you don't find the right mix. But I think people need to expect that, and setting the expectations with the employer at the get-go, but not expecting too much. You're not taking a job to start dictating terms. Like, you're working for them, not the other way around. So it's an opportunity and kind of a gift to get that leg up. So I think, I've always approached things with a level of humbleness, in that I'm there to serve, and then good things will come. And I think if more people did that, I think it'd be a better outcome.
Now, are you still feeling pretty upbeat about your career and the IT industry?
I am.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things happening. There's some big spaces, data, AI, IoT. It's going to be interesting to see what transforms in the next decade. You and I have been around for a long time, John. So, there was, we've seen, everything from, going prior to the internet, there wasn't discs, then we saw CD, then we saw Blu-ray, then we saw, digital cards. And so, I'm excited about the prospect, but I'm also cautious of the technology evolution.
Okay.
There's a couple of topics in the world that I think governments and corporations just need to take a level of caution. AI is one of them, I think. And I think the other one is just around genetics.
Yeah,
and
well,
stuff like
perhaps
that.
we
So,
might do another podcast later in the year where we pick a couple of topics.
yeah, but I'm super
can
pumped. We're
explore
working on, some really exciting projects at ACFS at the moment.
Yes.
We've kept a low profile. We've kept our head to the ground. This year's about, it's our 20th anniversary as well, so that's exciting. This year's all about delivery.
That's excellent.
Things are coming to a close, and I'm super excited about that.
I'm going to shake your hand and thank you. I've had a wonderful discussion with you. Good
Thank
fun,
you.
by the way. Yeah. So there you go, everyone. As the great Irish comedian Frank Carson once said, that discussion was an absolute cracker. In fact, Frank Carson also said, it's the way I tell them, but we may leave that for another day. My name is John Waters, Managing Director at Abercorn International Search. Thanks for watching the first Inspiring Careers of 2025, and I look forward to joining you all again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.